the night to follow him. The man waved his hand towards Xavier and told him not to be so emotional, but he replied that it was too much. Bayern smiled happily, saying that in his opinion, the gentleman is a very kind person and understands others well, and in general, they know his true intentions, so it is too early to start getting angry, and they need to watch him first. The fair-haired man bashfully looked away. After a while, a loud scream was heard in the castle. Arcus sat across from his son, saying that he knew it was a good thing, but he didn't have the resources to take them all in. The brown-haired man asked if he was willing to take them in. The man answered in the affirmative, saying that they couldn't just leave these poor souls in trouble. He gritted his teeth, saying that however, their food would only last for a couple of days, and then there would be nothing to feed them with. The protagonist looked at him, puzzled, and asked what he was talking about. He smirked and said that they just had a bunch of food for the refugees. After a while, he looked at the locust meat. Standing in the warehouse with his parents, Lloyd noted that they were collecting them to use for compost, and that's why they were storing them here. His father looked at him with a worried look and said that feeding the refugees these insects was a bet. He was shocked when his wife suddenly tried the meat. She looked at her husband and said that it tasted like shrimp, and since the orcs also ate it, she didn't see a problem. The woman rested her cheek on her hand, saying that there was a slight unpleasant smell, but they would try to do something about it. The guy smiled widely when she asked if he could lead the cooking unit. He answered in the affirmative, noting that this was why he had called her. After a while, a tent camp was set up. When the brown-haired man began to inspect it, Blank exclaimed that the first temporary tent had been erected, and he asked him to prepare even more materials as quickly as possible. The man on the observation tower waved a flag and said that about 100 more refugees were coming here. The protagonist grinned, saying that it was much faster than he thought. A large peapodong appeared next to him when he told him that everything needed to be done as soon as possible, because if they hesitated, the people would simply freeze. The mouse stuck his paws in the ground. Then he began to dig a hole. Bayern, holding a document in his hands, shouted loudly that they were recruiting a team to build heating systems. After Belle ordered, she spewed out water. The man waved a flag, telling about the arrival of people from the south and north. Marbella, standing in front of the women, exclaimed that now was the time to start turning insects into nutritious food. The women looked at her with puzzled eyes, saying that this was too much. The blonde closed her eyes. She showed them a book, saying that many years ago, a legendary cookbook was born, and it was written by a girl who was a cook for a dragon. She noted that its secrets were revealed in the book How I Became the Dragon King's Chef, and the book itself was found among the things of the black magician who was defeated by Lloyd. The women opened their mouths in surprise, exclaiming that this was a book of legendary recipes. Someone noted that thanks to this book, you can turn the most direct pain into heavenly. The system marked the end of the advertising integration. The protagonist looked down on the tent camp from above. He narrowed his eyes, thinking that there was still not enough space, and even if they filled the temporary settlements to the eastern mountains, there would still not be enough space. Lloyd scratched his head, thinking that for a while it would be enough, but in the long run. Suddenly he heard a loud cry. A woman was sitting by the tent with a child in her arms, who was crying and saying that he really wanted to go home. The mother told him that they no longer had a home, and they should be grateful that the people had given them shelter. The guy pursed his lips, hearing the child telling his dad to build them a new house. The woman apologized and said that someday they would definitely build it. The brown-haired man thought about home. He imagined his parents and thought that he remembered the first time he moved into their house, how he packed his things, and how happy his father and mother were. Remembering their faces, he thought about how they constantly repeated the word home and smiled, and these were smiles that he would never be able to see again. Next, he imagined small multi-story buildings, thinking that it was a small and shabby apartment on the outskirts, the very place that holds the happiest memories in his life. The woman herself was crying, hugging a child. The protagonist darkened, quietly telling him not to worry because very soon they will have a home. Starting to rise, he added that it was because he was here. Not far from him stood Xavier. Smiling, he sighed. The gentleman looked at him and noted that from now on, they will begin construction at a higher level than ever before. As he passed by, the blonde man asked if he had a plan for the refugees. The protagonist replied that of course he did. Lloyd smiled contentedly, saying that he was going to build an apartment complex. Apartments are a popular building style in Korea and the most effective solution to the problem that the estate currently faced. Imagining many multi-story buildings, the guy noted that in this space it is possible to build a huge complex of residential buildings, and this is a dense management due to the density of population. Then he imagined the design of the apartment itself, thinking about reducing the cost and time for construction. Then the brown-haired man imagined many people in the apartments, thinking that above, below and on the side everything is surrounded by walls, ideal for super maximum thermal insulation. He looked at the bay from above. With a sparkle in his eyes, the main character thought that the biggest thing was that they would be able to build an environment where refugees can be independent. Having designed holograms of multi-story buildings, he thought about the need to focus on their population and increase food power and establish a market. Then he fell to his knees, throwing up his hands, realizing that he could raise the tax. Smiling madly, the brown-haired man clenched his fists, thinking that after all this he could sit down and rest, provide a bath and money, mentally noting that the desire of every simple person is to make a fortune while not straining too much. He began to think that he would not have to manage the estate, and he could shift the duties to Bayern for a bonus and a raise. After the main character wondered what if he retire, and then decided that he would ask to raise a replacement for himself. The man suddenly grabbed his head, saying that he rarely felt unwell. After a while, Lloyd found himself with the others at the table, saying that he was risking a meeting about the construction of the Honey apartment complex, and then asked to pay a little attention to the information that he provided them. He began to point his fingers when Xavier said that he had objections regarding the name, which sounds much more narcissistic. The guy told him not to chatter off the point since they were at a meeting. The blonde said that he was not chatting because his words directly concerned the project. The brown-haired man exclaimed, telling him to get down to business because he was holding up the meeting. Looking at the gloomy Bayern, he asked how he was feeling. He replied that he had been having the same dream for several days, in which he worked for the devil until he grew old and died. The protagonist told him not to worry because such a thing would definitely not happen to him. He picked up the papers and offered to look at all the information provided. Showing a roundhouse, he explained that it was called Tori and it was a fortress-type residential complex that came from the eastern province of Fujian. Introducing it from the inside, Lloyd said that such buildings have the same style of construction with a simple bedroom and living room, and in the center there will be public spaces like a plane or a public toilet. He showed the next drawing, saying that he planned to build the same building, but in a square shape, because a square structure is erected much faster than a round one. Looking at all his comrades, Parquet said that he compared both buildings on several criteria, but did not take into account one huge advantage. He smirked, imagining the attack, and said that if they installed steel gates, the building would instantly turn into an impregnable fortress. Only Blank suddenly clapped his hands. Brown-haired also clapped and said that now is the time for questions. He began pointing his fingers when Xavier said that with their current financial situation, it was difficult to even get material for the refugee tents. The protagonist asked him if he was really suggesting to abandon them to their fate just because they were the ones bearing the financial burden. The fair-haired man replied that he did not mean that. Lloyd demanded only a positive or negative answer from him. He bowed his head when his father said that although he was worried about the finances, they should do something for these people. The boy responded by saying that he could only admire how brightly he looked into the future. He smiled and said that they needed to erect and prepare tents with a heating system and continue to provide food for the people. He noted that they would most likely have to give up all their money for the sake of the people. The brown-haired man mentally noted that they would have to raise as much money as possible to build them. The horses shuffled their hooves on the ground. The protagonist looked at the disgruntled Xavier and asked what was wrong with his face. He noted that he saw that he was offended, so much so that he did not even look him in the eyes. The blonde turned around with a tense look. Lloyd squinted in confusion. He turned away, saying that it was scary. Having brought his horse forward, he asked if they would succeed with this wild project or would they fail. He asked if they would be able to accommodate all the people, and then said that this was his project and he was in charge of it. Xavier looked at the back of the gentleman, who said that the one in charge should not hesitate and think, because only in this way can one earn absolute trust. Without turning his head, the guy said that the one who could let go of this bluff for a while was Xavier. The blonde's eyes widened. He looked down. Veins bulged on his face when he asked if it was true that this was some kind of emotional outlet. The brown-haired man smiled wickedly. A moment later, the knight hit him on the head, but only in his thoughts. They reached the Racona estate. The blonde was walking down the corridor. Two guys were walking towards him. The protagonist smiled widely and said that he was glad to meet him. Diego screamed in fear. Covering his head, he trembled when his face noted that they had not seen each other for a long time and asked what his scream meant. He asked how he was doing and if he was enjoying his expulsion. The blonde began to quietly call his father. The guy grabbed his hand, telling him not to be so afraid, because he was here to bring him back to the academy. Approaching, he, breathing steam, loudly said to quickly call his father. After a while, Viscount Racona was sitting in front of him, asking what does the increase in taxes mean. The brown-haired man leaned back on the couch, noting that he was talking about the tax on water. The man clenched his teeth, mentally cursing him, thinking that his son had been expelled from the academy, and now he wanted to raise taxes. His lips spread into a smile. He bowed his head and left. The Viscount went to the window, saying that he did not think he could understand because he was still so young. He showed the contract and said that according to the terms of this agreement, the price was fixed and he had no right to increase the price. Waving his hand, the chief took out a magnifying glass with his hand. Leaning it on the paper, He read a small paragraph of a footnote that the price stipulated in the contract could change depending on the mood of the supplier. The man grabbed him by the collar, shouting that this was a scam. Lloyd asked him to stop. He smirked, saying that they should stop this, after all, they were neighbors, and then noted that he was not forcing him to sign, and it would be better to call it an exchange from which he would benefit. The Viscount bared his teeth in irritation. The guy pointed his finger